Alright, hey guys, and welcome to another Blender tutorial. Today we're going to start off this two-part tutorial, which is talking about alpha maps and cycles, and how to use alpha maps as textures and cycles, because it's a little bit different from how it's done in Blender, if you all are familiar with that. And if not, it's okay, because when I walk you through the cycles one, we'll kind of explain why it's different than the Blender one. Now, I have this image here, and I will include a link in the description, but this is the image I'm going to be using. This is not an alpha map in itself, but the first part of our tutorial is going to be taking it into Gimp and making the alpha map. And when we do that, while we do that, we'll also talk about how to do it in Gimp, and we'll talk about why it's important to use alpha maps instead of just using a PNG with an alpha transparency. So first, what I'm going to do is, of course, go ahead and save this image. Just going to save it to... Actually, I don't even need to save it because I can just drag and drop directly into Gimp. So that's really nice. All right, so I have my image here. So first thing we'll do, like I always like to do in Gimp, is duplicate the layer and always keep a backup copy of every layer. If I make a change and I feel that it's a big enough change in the last layer that I might, if my work gets lost and I haven't saved in a while, it's important to be able to have those backups there so that if you do lose work, it's not a lot of work. So this is the leaf texture we're going to be using, and actually the alpha map is quite simple. So once we set that up in Gimp, I'm going to sit here and just talk a quick bit about why we use alpha maps sometimes and why not. So first, what we're going to do here in Gimp is we're going to go to colors on our duplicated layer, and we're going to hit threshold. And then we're going to go, and there's going to be two ways, and I will show you guys both. So this is the threshold way, and the threshold way, the reason why it's not always preferred is because threshold does leave a bit of a jagged edge, but for the most part, it's pretty good. So here we have, you mess around with it until you get this entire thing being white, but not so white that, either the whole image is white or that there's fragmentation showing around the edge. So I'm going to put it back up to 25, which I think is pretty good for this. So I'm going to press OK. And that's pretty much all we have to do for our alpha map. Don't have to delete anything or anything like that, because alpha maps are not stored the same way PNG alpha transparency is stored. Well, it is, but it doesn't look the same. So this is basically an alpha map, and an alpha map determines the amount of transparency a color has. So there could be, this leaf could be red or pink or whatever colors here, but this image, or what's called a mask, shows where the image should be transparent and where it shouldn't. Where it's black is where it won't be transparent. Black also represents a value of 0, and white represents where it should be should be opaque, so not transparent. White is a value of 1. Every value in between is represented by a shade of gray, and based on the shade of gray, 80%, 20% is how much of a percent the alpha should be. So alpha maps can, in fact, and are black and white images, because all it is basically numbers, but represented to us graphically, it's a bunch of it's a bunch of black and white and gray. So that's one way to make the alpha transparency, and this will give us a straight mask so that only the green leaf will be showing and not the black. There is another way to do it. So if we duplicate our layer here again and we press desaturate, and then I'm going to do it by luminosity. Although you can do it by any of the methods, luminosity tends to give you better contrast because it's actually taken the luminance values of an image. And I'm not going to get into what a luminance value is today, but if you look it up, it shouldn't take more than a Google search or two away. So, and you can pause the tutorial anytime, no rush. So we're going to press OK. And so now this is going to give us a slightly different image if we use this as the alpha map. And the reason why is because this, if you notice, is not 100% white like this mask is. This image will actually give us a somewhat transparent leaf. And for some things, you might actually want that. So we're going to try what we do in Blender with both of these, really, with both of these images to show you the difference. And that's pretty much all you have to do in Gimp. Now all you'd have to do is save as, and you actually, this is a BMP right now, but I would prefer to save it as a JPEG. But you can do it as pretty much any image format, and it'll be okay. PNGs hold alpha already, so they would have this image if we made this black transparent here, and we saved it as a PNG, it would automatically hold this, and we can actually extract that into cycles. But now there's a reason why we might do two separate images. And the reason is because while this might be a solid texture, let's say instead of a leaf, it's just a solid tileable texture, we might want it to only show up in certain parts, like for say graffiti or something. Now, if we're making a motion graphic, we want that graffiti to move, but we don't want to be bothered to animate this actual graffiti moving. And if it's a tileable texture or whatever, all we have to do is take our alpha map and animate it while keeping the original source texture unanimated. Now, this has its pros and cons. One of the main cons is images, if you have two separate images, instead of using one image for both its alpha and its standard image, you require more memory because the program will have to load up two separate images and do calculations. Although it's usually not that much of a performance cost unless you get really high resolution images and you have a ton running at once. Then yes, it could. The pro really, like I said, is you can animate the alpha map without ever having to worry about deforming this original image, which is very good in a lot of cases. But it all depends on really what you're doing, and what you're doing will influence what kind of texture maps you have. So this is just an example of one texture map. You can also use this particular desaturated image. It doesn't work for all things, but luminosity does work really well for AO maps. And if you don't know what those are, that'll be covered in another tutorial as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. This ends the first part of our tutorial. I know it was a bit short, but part 2 will be coming soon. Hope you enjoyed.